2017 was one of the best years for video games I've ever seen. It was so good that I thought there was no way 2018 was going to be able to live up to it, but much to my surprise, last year was loaded with great games as well. So, just like with every January, we're going to look back at our favorite stuff from the previous year, and today we're counting down our top 10 favorite video game characters of 2018. Although, to be honest with you, I almost made this a top 20 because there were so many good characters last year that there are some I genuinely feel bad about having to leave off. So, before we get to number 10, let's start our alarmingly large honorable mentions list. The Shopkeeper from The Messenger. Throughout your journey in The Messenger, this mysterious blue-robed figure keeps giving you vague hints and charming stories, all loaded with a mountain of snark and wit. If I could put someone on here just for dialogue, then I would, but sadly, it's hard for a shopkeeper, no matter how fun they are, to crack the top 10. BK from Donut County. He's a slacker raccoon who uses a phone app to suck everyone in town into a giant hole. Why? So he can get his hands on a rad toy copter. He's not a particularly deep character, or even all that likable, but there is something charming about how he just speaks to our inner id with what a garbage person he can openly be at times. Then again, he is a raccoon, so calling him a garbage person might actually be a compliment to him. Penny from Flipping Death. Have you ever had a job that you hated? Well, then meet Penny. After being fired from her first job for being too, let's say, festive.
Excuse me, dearie.
Behold, mortal! You have entered the domain of the dead! To where would you like us to send your restless soul? Perhaps it shall reside in the jar of endless torment! Or, for a nominal fee, mayhaps into the wooden closet of hell, to be lowered into the very maw of Hades himself!
Let me just check my husband's will.
Mrs. Durwood, while I do appreciate your, passion for performance, I'm afraid this is one egregious step too far.
Come on, Halloween is in a few weeks.
Right, but this is a funeral home! You're fired, Penny!
Died and ended up becoming a temp for the Grim Reaper. Penny is fun, relatable, and also a genuinely cool person who actually wants to help others even when she's the one who's in the most danger. G from Street Fighter V Arcade Edition. We spent months wondering who the mysterious G was. He was some Uncle Sam Abe Lincoln looking dude who popped up in a tease for the new season of Street Fighter characters, and that was all we knew. Was he a villain? Was he the new head of Shadowloo? Was he connected to Q from Street Fighter 3? Was he actually that gorilla guy from Bloody Roar? That's an actual theory that people had. I'm not even joking. That's how hard people wanted to figure out who this guy was. But when he finally dropped in August of last year, we learned the truth that G was a YouTuber who believed he was the president of Earth and talked like Colonel Sanders? Okay. I think it's safe to say that none of us saw that one coming. However, Street Fighter has always had a certain level of goofiness to it, and yet G still felt special in a world of demon kung fu fighters and green electric ape men. He was a brand of silly that brought an air of fun back to Street Fighter that many of us had been waiting on. Also, he is insanely fun to play as, so in a fighting game, that doesn't hurt either. And lastly, I just want to give one big honorable mention to the party members from Dragon Quest XI. Now, for lists like these, I tend to have a one character per game rule, and I can tell you this would have been a tough choice. Veronica is a quirky ball of sass, Eric is a lovable rapscallion who always has your back, and Sylvando is a faithful knight who decided he just wanted to make the world smile. I love these characters, but at the time of this recording, I'm only about halfway through the game, and I don't feel comfortable putting any of them on here without knowing where their stories will go. But I did want to stop real quick just to say how great every single one of them are. But now, on to number 10, Kirby from Nintendo. Yes, I'm not listing off a specific game with Kirby because this year he had two of his own games pop out and they were fairly decently received. People tended to enjoy them. They didn't blow anyone away though. However, I think we'll all remember that feeling we had the first time that we saw the trailer for Super Smash Bros. World of Light. And after watching every one of our beloved Nintendo characters get wiped out of existence, we were all cheering Kirby on as he escaped on his Warp Star. He then went on to become the only survivor of this video game apocalypse, as he had to go on an epic journey to free all of his friends. I know some of you might have a problem with me putting him on here just because he was the face of the adventure mode for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, but in my defense, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is amazing. It's one of the biggest games of the year, and if there was one character who you could say was the representative for it, it had to be Kirby. And I mean, come on, don't lie. No matter how salty you might be about him making this list, you know that somewhere in the back of your heart, when you watch that World of Light intro, a little voice rose up that just shouted out, "Go Kirby, go! You can do it!" And the fact that the entire world came together to chant that at some point in time this year, yeah man, that's enough for me to put Kirby on the list. Number 9, JJ Macfield from The Missing, JJ Macfield and the Island of Memories. It's really hard to talk about what makes JJ Macfield such a great character without spoiling the 4 or 5 huge twists in her game, but here goes. The Missing is a story that follows a girl as she goes through a personal journey that at first is incredibly vague, much like my description here, but as the game goes along and you unlock conversations from her past, you learn that JJ is going through something serious. And not giant light rays have wiped out your friends serious. No, an actual real-world struggle that many people go through, and in all honesty, I've never seen explored in a game before. And this game wasn't afraid to dive into what a nightmare that was for JJ, how tortured she was by it. I can't put her too high on the list because, well, honestly, this game was made by the guy who made Deadly Premonitions, and while he told an amazing story in this game, yeah, English still isn't his first language, and there are times that it shows. But even with the awkward dialogue, JJ is a character who provided a voice for many people out there and had a journey that went from fun to frightening to heartbreaking and everywhere in between. Number 8, Kassandra from Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Or, I guess you could also put Alexios here as well. I don't know. I didn't play as him. I played as Kassandra. So number 8 is Kassandra. Now, Kassandra gets on the list largely due to her huge personality. Don't get me wrong, her story and her quest are both engaging, but what makes you want to keep playing this game for as long as you can is because Kassandra is just exploding with charm. She's larger than life in a way that embodies the spirit of the Greek mythical heroes that she was inspired by. Her accomplishments rival that of Hercules, and she knows it because she is brimming with so much confidence, you could sell motivational posters that are just her flexing a bicep at you. And when she's on stage, she's so dynamic, she is going to command your attention. Number 7, Primrose from Octopath Traveler. Octopath Traveler was another game that was hard for me not to break my 1 character per game rule on, because this game featured 8 characters on their own journeys and each of them were worthy of being stars. But Primrose to me not only had the best voice actress, as the talented Laura Post gave her so much depth, but also her story was easily the most tormented and emotional. Her father was killed when she was just a child, and in order to track down his killers, she basically had to throw herself into a world of corruption, being controlled by sleazy criminals for years until she could finally embark on her quest. Every step of her journey will make you gasp at what she has to go through, and her struggle to find hope after all she's been through was easily the most dramatic out of the 8 that this game presented us with. Number 6, Madeline from Celeste. Madeline is a young girl who has set out on an epic quest to climb Mount Celeste, a mountain that has the uncanny ability to make what's inside of you come to life. Problem is, Madeline suffers from depression and anxiety. There's always a voice in the back of her head telling her that she can't do anything, that she's not good enough, reminding her to be afraid and to hate herself. So when this mountain brings that to life, it makes her quest one of the most challenging any video game has ever presented me with, but that challenge is there to make you understand what it's like to be Madeline. This game did a wonderful job of placing the player inside of her shoes as she has to face her own personal dark thoughts made real. Much like JJ Macfield, Madeline is a character meant to explore something very real that many people go through, and she was able to capture that voice perfectly this year and had a character arc that left you feeling warm and hopeful inside. Alright, so far we've had several characters this year who were all about exploring harsh realities or darker storylines. Heck, even Kirby got on here simply because all of his friends were killed. So before we continue, we need a giant dose of hilarious hijinks. So at number 5, Geist from Monster Prom. Now, I'll admit, Polly is kind of on here to be a representative for the entire cast of Monster Prom because this game had some of the best dialogue and interactions of any game this year. And all these characters were so dynamic, you instantly fell in love with them, which is good since that's the entire purpose of the game. But if I had to pick one for this list, it would have to be Polly. She is a living ball of chaos, existing only to find the biggest party imaginable, even if that means destroying everything and everyone around her. No, seriously, there's DLC for this game where her party antics cause the apocalypse. Monster Prom is amazing, everyone. Go and play it. And yes, I will admit that other characters have depth and baggage to them that make them far more developed than Polly, but every year you need one character on this list who's just here because they're fun, and Polly might be one of the most fun characters in video game history. Number 4, Spider-Man from Marvel's Spider-Man. This year, we saw the long-awaited PS4 Spider-Man game come out, and we could tell from the trailers that it was going to have great gameplay, but what really won people over was that it gave us probably the best interpretation of Spider-Man we've ever seen outside of the comics. And coming from a lifelong Spider-Man fan, it was even better than about 95% of those. We saw the struggle that Pete goes through trying to balance his superhero career and his personal life, but he still worked his butt off to make it through every single day no matter what life threw at him. And honestly, that's kind of what we always loved about this character, and this game knew that. We saw him connect with everyone around him and genuinely caring about others and working to make the world a better place, not just in costume, but out of it as well. This game never forgot that Peter Parker was just as important as Spider-Man was. But for me, personally, the thing that I loved about this interpretation of Spider-Man the most was that you could see him struggling. He always sounded exhausted, which let you know that no matter what amazing feats he pulled off, he was still human, which is one of the most important things to capture about this character. Number 3, Connor from Detroit Become Human. Alright, I hate starting it like this, but Detroit Become Human had a few problems to say the least with how it delivered its message of robots looking for equal rights. But one area where it succeeded was with the story of Connor. He's an android who was built to assist the police catch the deviants, androids who had broken their programming to form real human emotions. However, as the story goes along, you as Connor will have to make many difficult decisions that cause him to question his programming. And considering that questioning his programming was not in his programming, this leads to complications. Connor will go through the entire range of emotions in his journey, none of which he was prepared for, and by the end of this game, when he awakens and comes alive, it really does feel like he's truly been reborn. Unless you decide to play the dark route in this game, in which case he's just going to remain a cold, heartless monster the entire way through, but hey, then he's still a pretty cool villain. Number 2, Kratos from God of War. Kratos underwent one of the best deconstructions and personal explorations of any video game character in history this year. We had spent 3 primary games and a buttload of side stories exploring Kratos being a one-man rage machine as he sought revenge against the Greek gods, ripping and tearing through everything in his way to the point where he was as much a villain as the gods he was seeking revenge on. I mean, in his last game, he caused the freaking apocalypse because, screw it, these gods have to pay. But this year, the new God of War game came out and it asked the hard question. Then what happened? And we saw that Kratos settled down, had a wife and a child, and then his wife died. But not because she was killed by something that he could go out and punch, Not because of anything that he could seek revenge on, but just because sometimes that's what happens. Sometimes that's life. And we watched as Kratos had to actually deal with an issue that he couldn't punch and tear his way through. We watched as he had to connect with a child for the first time since losing his first family. This was a deeply emotional story for this character, a story that none of us thought we'd ever really see, because it's not like Kratos was always one-dimensional. He wasn't. He had a backstory, he had a reason for going out there and getting revenge, but these games had always mainly been about the action. It had always been about seeing what was the next big giant thing that you could rip in half. But this was the year that the God of War franchise made us realize the greatest fight Kratos had wasn't with the gods, it was with himself. It was with who he was and what he had done. And lastly, at number 1, Arthur Morgan from Red Dead Redemption 2. Honestly, I feel like for Arthur, you can just repeat everything I said about all the other characters on this list. Larger than life personality, check. Witty dialogue, double check. Deeply emotional journey that struggles with the things that he's done in his past as he tries to make up for them. Oh, you best believe that's a check. Arthur Morgan spent his entire life as a criminal, but now the Old West is coming to an end, and he has to realize the world that he knew doesn't want or need him anymore. There's no home for him anywhere. But the world isn't the only thing that's changing, as he's now forced to take a look at himself, at his legacy, and what he and his gang have done. And with the time he has left, he's going to try and set as much right as he can. But this world has backed him into such a corner that you know he can't win. You know he's not going to get a happy ending when so much is against him, and when the man he owes his life to is weighing him down like an anchor. And he knows this too, which makes his struggle to do right so much more touching and heroic, because he knows that there's no out for him. But if he can just save one person, then that's all that matters. Now again, I'm only referring to what happens if you go down the good path with Arthur. But if you've never played this game before, I'm begging you, choose to go down the good path. Because if you do, you'll end up seeing one of the best redemption arcs in video game history. I mean, hell, it has to be good. They put it in the title of the game. You know Arthur Morgan's redemption is going to be something special. But that is it, everyone. Those are our top 10 video game characters of 2018. Let me know your favorite video game characters in the comments down below, and make sure that you come back next week when we're going to count down the top 10 video game moments of 2018, all leading up to the end of this month where we count down our top 10 games from last year. You can always follow me on Twitter and Twitch at Professor Thorgy, and if you want to support this channel, then make sure that you hit up our Patreon at patreon.com/ProfessorThorgy. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Come back next time.